All right, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, Paddy Pimblett versus Tony Ferguson was made official for UFC 296, and I want to talk about it a little bit. I want to talk about the matchup itself, how I think the fight might go. I want to talk about what the UFC, in my opinion, is clearly trying to do, and why my initial reaction when I saw this fight was booked was that Dana White was evil. That was literally the first thing that came to my mind. So, I've seen a lot of people criticizing this matchup, and to be honest, rightfully so. And to me, it is pretty transparent and clear that the UFC is trying their best to get Paddy Pimblett a win, and not just a win. I do believe that they're trying to get him a finish, like an opponent that is finishable, also with a big name attached to it, so that people stop talking about the Jared Gordon fight and kind of forget about it, get it in the rear view, and now we can talk about his spectacular win over Tony Ferguson. Now, the only people that are really talking about this matchup in a positive light, in my opinion, are UFC employees, essentially, right? Like Michael Bisping has said stuff about it, and, Chael Sonnen even said that he thinks Tony Ferguson is going to whoop Paddy Pimblett, things like this. I just don't think so, man. Dana White tried his absolute best last night after the Contender Series. He does this press conference every Tuesday. He tried his best to sell it because one of the reporters, rightfully so, asked him about the critical backlash of this matchup. And what he said is that essentially Tony Ferguson, while he's on a 6-fight skid, is not an easy fight for anybody. And he has looked really good up until he didn't in all of those fights. He said he looked really good all the way up until the very end, all the way up until he got finished, which maybe a few fights ago you could actually argue that, but not really, dude. And I want to go over some of his losses and talk about why that, in my opinion, is absolute horseshit. Now, there absolutely have been fights in that 6-fight skid where he looked good. It almost looked like the old Tony Ferguson was back, and then something bad happened. But in some of those losses, that was just not the case, and I want to go over them briefly. So it starts off with Justin Gaethje, right? So the first 4 that started this skid, you could still argue, well, like, oh, he's only losing to the best in the world, right? Like, he loses to Justin Gaethje, which, by the way, he won rounds in that fight. I know that he ended up getting the absolute shit beaten out of him towards the end, but if you, at the end of round 2, drop Justin Gaethje with a nasty uppercut, he definitely had moments in that fight, and it was not really until the end that Justin Gaethje did take over. So I guess you could argue it for that one. He did look good at points in that fight. The next 2, however, he looked like shit, and I'm saying this with all due respect. Tony Ferguson is an OG. He has been around for a long time. I feel like the UFC really did him dirty by stripping him of the interim title. He was on a 12-fight win streak, if I'm not mistaken. Dude's a monster. He didn't even need to take that Justin Gaethje fight. He probably did it because he was in fear that the UFC would take away his title fight once again like they did, even though this time it was Khabib Nurmagomedov that pulled out of the fight and not him due to an injury. But he didn't even need to take that fight. He also made weight the day of when he was supposed to fight Khabib, and then made weight again like an absolute, like the fucking maniac that he is, okay? It was completely unnecessary. I don't know why he would want to drain his body the way that he did, but it is what it is, dude. The Charles Oliveira and the Beneil Dariush losses were not that. He got dominated, in my opinion, over the course of 3 rounds, and really the only good thing that you could say about him, the only good thing that comes out of that fight is his mental fortitude, like the mental toughness to not tap. Because had there been 5 more seconds in that round with Charles Oliveira when he had that armbar completely locked in, tucked under the armpit and leaning back, that shit would have snapped. Beneil Dariush, he allowed him to rip his knee to shreds with that heel hook, and Beneil Dariush was probably like, what the fuck? And look, I know that these guys are top-notch grapplers. Beneil Dariush, ADCC champion multiple times. Charles Oliveira, one of the best grapplers probably to ever step foot in this octagon. But Tony Ferguson's grappling was supposed to be the thing that everybody thought, like the reason he could have a chance or even maybe beat Khabib. Everybody would talk about his grappling, and once upon a time it seemed like it was very good. I feel like he may have, I'll get to that in a second. The Michael Chandler one, he did look good in the beginning. This was the first fight where I thought, oh my god, the old Tony is back. He just dropped Chandler in round 1, almost finished him off. It went into round 2, and he got killed. He died that night. His soul left his body. It was one of the worst knockouts I have ever seen. And I was concerned for him for a couple minutes when he wasn't getting up. But he did look good in that fight. Now we get to the last 2. The Nate Diaz one, look, I love Nate Diaz as much as the next guy. He's a far cry from Justin Gaethje. He's a far cry from Charles Oliveira. He is a far cry, in my opinion, from Beneil Dariush. And Tony did not look good in that fight. And look, I know it was like a short notice replacement. They had to switch shit up on the fly of fight week, by the way, which is just insane because Khamzat was having weight troubles or whatever, dude. He just didn't look good. I think that this was a blessing for Tony Ferguson, and he still ended up getting finished. I think Li Jingliang would have done horrible, horrible, horrible things to Tony Ferguson had that fight gone through. But you could still maybe kind of sort of make excuses for him, although he just didn't look good in that fight. Like, his skills just don't look as sharp as they used to. Even on the feet, he wasn't having a whole lot of success. On the ground, he basically put his head in the position for Nate Diaz to wrap up that guillotine, something that I couldn't see him doing just 4 years ago when he's facing guys like Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Anthony Pettis, guys like I couldn't see him doing that. Even when he's fighting Justin Gaethje and Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush, those two, Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush, he was locked in submissions. Like, they were locked in. Do you know what I mean? Now he's tapping to a guillotine, whereas previously, he was about to let his arm break. He was letting his knee get ripped to shreds. And in my opinion, I know Nate Diaz has phenomenal jiu-jitsu. I don't think he's on the level of a Beneil Dariush, of a Charles Oliveira. So even just in those couple of years, you see a pretty significant decline. Then we get to Bobby Green. Dude, I'm not trying to be shitty. I don't ever see Bobby Green being in the top 5 or anything like that. I don't think he's anywhere near Justin Gaethje, a Charles, a Beneil, a Michael Chandler even. I just don't. And especially in terms of grappling. I'm actually curious, how many submissions do you guys think Bobby Green has? He has 9 submissions. That's way more than I thought it was, but I want to go back to the last one that he ever got, because this one I feel like was the first one in a good long time. The last time he got a submission over anybody, UFC 156 Jacob Volkman in 2023. So over a decade ago, that was the last time he got a submission. So while he's got a few on his record, it's not really his main, like, bread and butter. He likes to box. Do you know what I mean? And Tony Ferguson, I feel like, should not be getting submitted by a guy like Bobby Green. And he did look good in that fight also. That's the problem. He looked good in that fight in moments. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he actually hurt Bobby Green, maybe even dropped him at one point. And I know that the eye poke happened, and that's very unfortunate. It just is. But he tapped with 6 seconds left in the fight, which is frustrating. Also, I swear to fucking God, dude, you could poke Charles Oliveira and Beneil Dariush's, both of them. You could poke them both. Make them close their eyes completely. You put Bobby Green on top of them in that position, he's not submitting them. I don't think so. And I get that Charles Oliveira was submitted with an arm triangle against Islam Makhachev. That's Islam Makhachev. He got dropped first. I still think that if he was hurt the same way that he was against Islam Makhachev and you put Bobby Green on top of him, he's not submitting him. I just don't think so, man. Like, I feel like as a guy who was heralded as this crazy, weird grappler who's got all these crazy moves, he'll hit a Darce from anywhere. He got a fucking, what was it, dude? Some weird choke, a Bravo choke, like shit that we don't usually see. You see this guy getting submitted by a guy that primarily, for the most part, wants to stand on the feet and box, and it's just not a good fucking look. And Paddy Pimblett is a good grappler. That's like the only good thing about his fight game. His grappling is good. The only problem is we haven't really seen him grapple against an extremely high-level opponent in the UFC. And I get that he broke his foot in the Jared Gordon fight, but what was strange to me is that he only shot 3 takedowns throughout the course of that fight. 1 of them in round 1, 2 of them in round 3. And I know that you kind of need your feet to drive in order to shoot like a double leg or a single leg or anything like that, but you also need your foot to pivot and put weight on when you're throwing strikes. And he threw way more strikes than Jared Gordon did throughout the course of that fight. He didn't land as much, but he definitely threw more strikes than Jared Gordon did, and like, you need your foot for that shit. So I don't understand why he seems to have this weird ego thing about him where he feels the need to stand with guys that I feel as though if he were to take them down and try to submit them the way that he did, he would probably have a little bit more success. In theory, Tony Ferguson, I guess, maybe could potentially win this fight. He could maybe clip Paddy on the feet. He could maybe do something like that. But we need the old El Kukui to show up. He does not look the way that he used to. in his frame, in his musculature, everything. And I think that part of the problem is after that Justin Gaethje fight, if I'm not mistaken, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, he essentially fired his entire corner. And I've also heard from other people, other fighters on YouTube videos and things like that, that he sort of created his own gym with his own coaches. And I know that he was kind of a odd one and a loner before, and I don't mean that disparagingly. I mean that he would go train somewhere, he would bring coaches in as opposed to going and training at one of these large gyms so that he could have more, like, everything's more individual. It's all based on him. It's not a class setting. Do you know what I mean? He used to do that. Like Eddie Bravo, pardon me, used to go train with him at Big Bear all the time. He used to rent a house, put the mats down, and he would bring his coaches there. It seems as though he's got a bunch of yes men around him, and that is not a good thing. It seems like if anybody disagrees with him or does shit that he doesn't like, he just gets rid of them, which is not good, dude. As a fighter, you fucking need your coach to tell you when you're fucking up, and you need to swallow your pride and your ego and say, okay, because you know what? A lot of the times they know better, and even if they don't, they have different angles that they can see. When you're in a cage, you can't see everything. You're like tunnel vision on the guy in front of you. Your coach is looking at things from a different angle. He can tell you shit that you might be missing. And you just need to have you just need to swallow your pride and accept that. And I feel like that's not what Tony Ferguson's doing. Like, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that he did do that. He created a gym, all of his coaches. I'm pretty sure that he's even told people, if you come to train here, you can't train anywhere else. You have to be in this gym, and you can't bring anything outside of what you get shown in this gym, which is just fucking strange, dude. Like, that's some Josh Fabia shit. Okay, dude, Fabio, whatever the fuck his name is. Tony Ferguson, dude, is losing his mind, and he just doesn't look what he used to look, and it's sad because I don't want to watch him lose to Paddy Pimblett. I just don't, dude. I don't. I would love to see him knock Paddy Pimblett the fuck out. That would be one of the best things of all time. That would be incredible. I just don't know that it's going to happen. I think that Paddy Pimblett will eventually make his way to the ground and probably maybe submit Tony. Dude, if Tony didn't get subbed by Bobby fucking Green last time out, I would not be saying this. Nate Diaz subbing you, ain't nothing wrong with that, dude. He subs a lot of guys, okay? He didn't get subbed by Oliveira and Dariush, though. That's the problem, man. He's progressively getting worse, and obviously that comes with age and the amount of damage that he's taken. But 2020 and 2021, that still came out fucked up, but it is what it is, dude. He was gonna let his arm break, right? He let his knee get torn to shreds, and then his last two fights, he's tapping to chokes, which is just strange because I'll tell you what, dude, I'd rather go to sleep than let some dude snap my fucking arm in half, eh? This is an unfortunate matchup, man, and it's pretty transparent that the UFC is trying to get Paddy Pimblett a good, recognizable signature win for the star that they are trying to build. Hopefully, for me, dude, I'm biased. Hopefully, Paddy Pimblett is unable to get it done because I don't like the guy. I don't like listening to him speak. And you know what's going to be really interesting? I just thought of this, actually. Paddy Pimblett goes on a lot of rants, and I'm not saying this to be shitty, because it's, a pretty noble goal, I guess you could say, or a noble cause. He talks a lot about, like, men's mental health and how his friend committed... I've got friends that have killed themselves, too, do you know what I mean? And, of course, I would rather them have came to me and spoken about it instead of going and tying a rope around their neck like they did. So Paddy Pimblett, sometimes he has noble causes that he speaks about, and that's all fine and dandy. What's going to be really interesting is if he attacks Tony verbally for the kind of shit that Tony's been going through, where the issue, the restraining order on his wife, the holy water, the drunk driving, the flipping the fucking truck, all of the crazy shit that he's clearly, a little nuts. So it'll be interesting to see if a guy who so strongly advocates for men's mental health and men speaking out about it and all this shit, if he attacks verbally Tony Ferguson for his fucking insanity, because that would be a little bit hypocritical. But it is what it is, dude. It's the fight game. So anyways, I hope Paddy Pimblett takes a Tony Ferguson elbow, gets dropped, and Tony's able to finish him off. And I just hope that Tony doesn't get subbed by Paddy Pimblett, because I'll tell you what, dude, it's not looking good. It just isn't, man. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, though, because I am curious to hear your opinions on this fight, whether or not you think Tony gets it done, or if you think we see a tragic end to Tony Ferguson's career. Like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I will see you at the next video. Bye-bye.